She nearly didn't stop. The petrol gauge had been low since bridged, and she had been telling herself for 20 miles that she would stop at the next one, and the next one had appeared and she had driven past it for reasons she could not fully account for. And then the road had gone dark and the valley had closed in on both sides and the gauge had moved from low to the kind of low that communicates a different quality of urgency. The petrol station appeared at the edge of a small Welsh town. Its forecourt lit against the October night, a single attendant visible through the glass of the kiosk, the kind of place that stays open until 2 in the morning because somewhere along the valley someone will always need fuel or milk or a sandwich or simply a lit window against the dark. There is a specific quality to a petrol station at 11 o'clock at night. The forecourt lights produce a particular kind of illumination, not the warm, diffused light of inhabited places, not the harsh fluorescent of institution, but something between the two. The specific practical brightness of a space designed to be visible from the road and functional in the dark. The pumps stand in it with the patient, mechanical quality of things that are operational whether anyone uses them or not. The kiosk at the center of it holds a single human being, and the human being holds the space together, and the space holds the motorist, and the motorist refuels and goes back into the dark, and the human being remains. She pulled in. She filled the tank. The October night was cold enough that her breath was visible in the forecourt lights. She paid by card at the pump. She was almost back in the car when she heard it. Not the words, the tone, the specific rising quality of a voice that has decided it is not going to be told no, and is making this clear with the particular escalation of someone who has run out of reasonable objections and has decided that volume is the remaining option. She stopped. She looked at the kiosk. Through the glass, the situation was legible in the way that situations through glass always are. Compressed into a single tableau, all the relevant information visible at once. A man at the counter, his back to her, the body language of someone leaning into a confrontation he had decided he was going to win. And behind the counter, a young woman, early 20s, slight build, dark hair pulled back, the uniform of a petrol station employee, holding herself very still with the specific, practiced stillness of someone who has been trained in how to handle difficult customers and is executing that training at considerable personal cost. She had been executing it for a while. This was not the beginning of the conversation. The man had the posture of someone who had built up to something, who had been making a complaint or a demand or both and had now arrived at the point where the complaint and the demand had become the same thing, which was simply, I am going to stand here until you give me what I want, and what I want is for you to be afraid. The man was not drunk. This was, in a way, the more difficult version of the situation. Drunk was explicable and had a trajectory. This was something else. A man who had decided that the person behind the counter at a petrol station at 11 o'clock at night was an appropriate target for whatever the day had built up in him, and who had found in the kiosk's isolation and the young woman's professional obligation to remain civil a set of conditions that suited his purpose. The young woman was not afraid. Or rather, she was afraid and was not showing it, which is a different and more difficult thing. Bonnie Tyler had spent 50 years in rooms with people. She had learned to read a room the way she had learned most things, not from a textbook, but from repetition and consequence. From the specific education of being a woman in a professional environment across 5 decades that had not always been straightforward. She had been in rooms where the energy was wrong in exactly this way, where one person had decided that the asymmetry of a situation gave them a right they had not been granted and was exercising it, quietly or loudly, in the specific direction of someone who could not effectively push back. She knew what it looked like. She knew what it felt like, from both sides. Bonnie Tyler looked at the car. She looked at the kiosk. She picked up her bag. She went in. The door made the sound petrol station doors make, the specific, slightly pneumatic sound of a door not designed for silence opening onto a space not designed for comfort. The man at the counter turned. The young woman behind the counter looked up. She did not announce herself. She did not address the man. She walked to the small refrigerated section along the back wall and selected a bottle of water with the unhurried deliberation of someone who has come in for a specific thing and intends to purchase it. She looked at the water. She looked at the other things in the refrigerated section: sandwiches in triangular packaging, energy drinks, a small selection of dairy products. She chose a chocolate bar from the stand nearby. The interior of the kiosk was the specific interior of all petrol station kiosks everywhere. The compressed commercial density of a small space that has been asked to contain a very large quantity of products. The specific smell of a space that is heated in winter and not particularly ventilated. The low hum of the refrigeration unit and the overhead lighting that is functional and nothing else. It was not a place designed for lingering. It was a place designed for transaction. She lingered anyway. She took her time at the refrigerated section. She read the labels on things she did not intend to buy. She considered briefly a bottle of juice and decided against it, and then reconsidered and decided against it again and set it back. She was not performing deliberation. She was simply present, an additional person in a space where there had been, effectively, two people. One of them held in place by the requirements of the job, and one of them using that fact. She took these to the counter. She set them down. She looked at the young woman with the expression of someone who intends to pay for things and is ready to do so when the previous situation has resolved itself. The man looked at her. She did not look at the man. She looked at the young woman. There is a specific quality to being looked past, to being in a room where someone has assessed the situation and decided that you are not the primary focus, and has communicated this assessment so completely that your options have narrowed without any confrontation having taken place. The man experienced this quality. He continued to stand at the counter for a moment. Then he said something brief and deflating, the conversational equivalent of gathering something from the floor, and he left. The door made its pneumatic sound. His car started. He drove away. The petrol station forecourt was quiet. The young woman behind the counter did not say anything immediately. She was doing the specific thing that people do in the immediate aftermath of a situation that has required them to hold themselves together, the slight involuntary redistribution of the self, the quiet reassembly of the ordinary. She picked up the scanner. She scanned the water and the chocolate bar without looking at either of them. $4.20, she said. Bonnie Tyler paid. She put her card back in her bag. She did not move immediately toward the door. She looked at the young woman. "Are you all right?" The young woman looked at her. It was the look of someone deciding, in real time, how to answer a question they have been asked too many times tonight in the version that does not mean it and have just been asked once in the version that does. "I'm fine," she said. Then, a beat later, "He comes in, not often, he's..." She stopped, searching for a word that was accurate without being dramatic. "He's a lot." "Yes," Bonnie Tyler said. "He is." Something in the young woman's expression shifted. The very slight shift of someone who has just had a piece of information confirmed that they already knew but needed to hear from someone outside their own head. "You didn't have to come in," she said. "I needed water," Bonnie Tyler said. The young woman looked at the water. She looked at Bonnie Tyler. There was a pause that contained everything that needed to be said about the water. "Thank you," she said, very quietly. "What's your name?" Bonnie Tyler said. "Ceri." "Ceri." She said it the way you say a name when you want the person attached to it to understand that it has been registered, not as a data point but as themselves. "You handled that well. You looked like you'd handled it before." "It's a night shift," Ceri said. "You learn." "You do," Bonnie Tyler said. "Then, get home safe." She picked up the water and the chocolate bar and she walked out through the pneumatic door and into the October night. Ceri watched her go. She watched the car pull out of the forecourt and turn back onto the valley road and disappear into the dark. Then she looked at the counter, the specific, slightly disordered surface that a difficult customer leaves behind, the residue of a confrontation in the arrangement of objects, and she straightened it. She picked up the display card that had been knocked slightly sideways and set it back. She put the scanner back on its cradle. She had been doing the night shift 3 times a week for 14 months. She was 22 years old and was doing this job because the money paid for the university course she was doing during the day, a calculation she had made carefully and was sticking to with the specific, determined practicality of someone who knows exactly what they are working toward and has decided that the working toward it is not negotiable, regardless of what the individual components of it require. The night shift was one of the components. The man who came in periodically and was a lot was another component. She had learned as she had told the woman to handle it. The course was in Cardiff, a day course, 9 to 5 on the days she did not have night shifts. The two things rotating around each other in the way that the lives of people who are funding their own education tend to rotate. She commuted. She slept when she could. She had done this for 14 months and she had 4 more months to go, and she knew exactly what 4 months looked like from the inside of it, the specific distance of something that is close enough to see but still requires significant continued effort to reach. What she had not learned in 14 months was how to make the handling of it feel like something other than survival. That was the thing about survival. It was necessary and it worked and it was what you did. But it had a quality that the ordinary continuation of a person's life did not have, and that quality accumulated across 3 night shifts a week in a way that only became visible when you stopped and counted it. She had not been counting it tonight. She had been getting through the shift, the way you get through shifts. And then a woman had come in from the forecourt and had bought water she did not need and had stood at the counter until the man with the specific escalating voice had run out of whatever energy the confrontation had been running on, and had then looked at Ceri and said, "You handled that well. You looked like you'd handled it before." She had. She had handled it before. 50 times, perhaps, across 14 months. And not once, until tonight, had anyone said, "You handled that well." It was, she thought, finishing the last 2 hours of the shift. The kind of thing that cost nothing and landed somewhere specific. The kind of thing you carried. Not dramatically, just present. Like a name said in a way that means "I see you." The road back through the valley was the road it had always been, dark and specific, the hills on both sides, the October fields gone from the warmth of October daytime to the cold clarity of October night. Bonnie Tyler drove with the radio on low, the night valley going past in the way that late-night valley roads go past, unhurried and personal. She thought about Ceri, 22 years old, night shift, the kind of determined practicality that carries a person through things that would flatten someone less certain of where they are going. She had the specific quality. Bonnie Tyler had recognized it immediately, in the posture and the scan this, scan that efficiency of someone who has compartmentalized their circumstances and is functioning inside them with full competence, of someone who knows the difficult part is temporary and is treating it accordingly. She thought about what it was to be 22 and working 3 nights a week in a lit kiosk on a Welsh valley road, and to know that the man with the escalating voice might come back next week, and to handle it, every time, with the specific practice stillness that training and necessity had installed. She thought about herself at 22. She had been Gaynor Hopkins at 22, singing in pubs in South Wales, learning the specific hard-won skills of holding a room together when a room didn't necessarily want to be held together. She had been learning at 22 how to handle it. She had not known then where the handling of it was taking her. You rarely knew. She thought about the word temporary, about how many times she had applied it to her own circumstances across the years, and how many times it had turned out to be accurate, and how the accuracy had been impossible to verify in advance, which was what made the temporary so difficult to survive. Not the duration, but the uncertainty of the duration. Ceri knew her temporary had 4 months in it. That was an advantage. Bonnie Tyler had not always known her temporaries had endings. She had had to proceed on the assumption that they did. You just got on with the shift. You learned. And occasionally someone came in from the forecourt and stood in the room until the specific quality of the confrontation changed. And that was something, even if it was only water and a chocolate bar and a name said in a way that meant, "I see you, Ceri." You handled it. You did. She arrived home before midnight. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Robert, as always, still up in the peripheral, undemonstrative way of a man who stayed up not to wait but simply to be there when she arrived. She told him about the petrol station in the way she told him things, briefly, without embellishment, the essential shape of it, the gauge, the forecourt, the kiosk, the man with the escalating voice, the young woman with the practiced stillness. Robert listened. He put the kettle on. "Did she know who you were?" he said. "Not when I came in," Bonnie Tyler said. "She might have worked it out. I don't know. It didn't matter." "No," he said. "It doesn't." He poured the tea. The kitchen was warm. Outside the valley was the valley. Dark and quiet and entirely itself. She thought about Ceri finishing her shift at 2 in the morning and driving home through the same valley roads. She thought about 14 months of 3 nights a week and 4 months remaining and the Cardiff course and the specific determined architecture of a life being built in increments. She thought about what it was to be 22 and working a lit kiosk against the October dark, and to have worked out that the temporary was survivable because it was temporary. She had been 22 once and had not known that. She had learned it, and the learning had taken longer than 4 months and had required things she had not anticipated requiring. Everyone's temporary was different in its length and its contents. The thing that was the same was the need for someone, somewhere along the duration of it, to look up and say, "You're doing this correctly. You handled it. I see that you did." "She'll be all right," Robert said, reading the silence accurately as he had read silences for 50 years. "She will," Bonnie Tyler said. "She knows where she's going." The tea was good. The kitchen was warm. The October valley outside the window was entirely itself, as it had always been and would continue to be, giving nothing away and requiring nothing back. Bonnie Tyler died on the 9th of July 2026. In the months that followed, the stories arrived, from everywhere the voice had reached, which was nearly everywhere. Most of them were about the songs, some were about the concerts, a few were about the small, specific, unrecorded moments that nobody had planned and nobody could verify, and that were, for precisely those reasons, entirely believable to anyone who had encountered the directness and warmth that had always been, underneath the voice and the fame and the 50 years of stages, the whole of who she was. Ceri finished her university course. She did not talk publicly about the October night, because it was not a public thing. It was a private thing that had happened in a petrol station kiosk in a Welsh valley at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, between two people who had no reason to know each other's names and who had exchanged, in the space of 4 minutes, the minimum necessary acknowledgement of each other's humanity. She told one person. She told her mother on the phone a few days after the news came through in July 2026. Her mother asked what happened. Ceri told her. She came in and she stood there and the man left, and then she paid for her things and she said, "I handled it well." "Did you?" her mother said. "I did," Ceri said. That was the whole of it. The minimum offered once in a petrol station at the edge of a Welsh town to a 22-year-old who was handling it. You handled that well. Sometimes that is the sentence a person needs, and the sentence a long shift will never give them, and the sentence that costs nothing and is worth everything. The petrol gauge had been low since Bridgend. She had stopped because she needed to. She had gone into the kiosk because the situation required it. She had bought water she did not particularly need and a chocolate bar, and she had stood in a room until the dynamic of the room changed, and then she had paid and said a name and left. It was a small Tuesday. It was an ordinary October. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody recorded it. It did not make any list of significant events in any year. It was one of the 10,000 small, specific, unrecorded things that a person does across a life when they are the kind of person who reads a room and stops when they nearly didn't stop and goes in. That was who she was. In the smallest version and the largest version of herself, that was exactly who she was.